Very quickly, I'm Martin Macmillan, founder of Pollen VC. We are a specialist lender into particularly the gaming economy. We provide non-dilutive financing alongside venture capital, but one of the things we do a lot of is spending time, trying to help founders improve financial literacy in financial modeling and so on, so they can make more informed decisions. I'm going to start with a fairy tale this morning. This is something that came to us a few months ago after hundreds and hundreds of conversations with developers over the years. So, once upon a time, ambitious mobile gaming studio founder. She wanted to try building all sorts of different games, all sorts of genres, all sorts of types, to figure out where the money was at. First she tries hyper-casual. This was admittedly a couple of years ago. So lots and lots of money going into it. She saw big exits of hyper-casual publishers. Note, publishers, not studios. But she struggled to make enough hits. She couldn't just knock them out one after the other. Because it was very hits-driven business, and it was they're like sort of cannonballs being fired, and serving crappy ads to kids didn't make her feel good about herself. So she put that one down. Then she read all the hype, and she wanted to build merge games. So the great thing about merge games is they had super long LTVs. People would play for potentially years and years and years. And she also heard that the VCs were super into investing big sums of money into games with like long franchises, with long-dated user bases and LTVs. But the problem was the break-evens on those sorts of games could be 9 months, 12 months, 15 months. And so she found out that the porridge was cold by the time she got ROAS positive on those games. Then the VCs came home. The world is changing. After they'd raised lots and lots of money from their own LPs, they realized something wasn't right. So after 15 years of everything being up and to the right, the world has changed. So they decided to come home and give it a bit of a rethink. The market was forcing them to think about how they were handing out the apples, and not just anyone with a good idea in a game, regardless of genre or anything else, would get it. And the other thing the VCs realized that most of the apples, particularly when they were funding long-dated games, which were hugely capital intensive to actually get cohorts ROI positive, most of the money was just basically going straight into Google and Facebook and TikTok ads. So it was like a direct transfer of money from them to the ad platforms. So when she was thinking about it some more, she wanted to get the just right approach. Not too short, not too long. And she decided she was going to try and build games that could achieve a positive ROAS in a short enough period of time to matter, but not so long it was going to require so much money, and not so short that she kept having to think of new games every week. Came up with a sweet spot of 60 to 180 days, designing for how she could actually create games and break even and build a business from it. And everyone lived happily ever after. So, moral of the story, genre matters, and the key takeaway is build games where you can make a decent return in a reasonable time frame. Start with basically where is the break-even, where's the return period for the games, and then figure out what sort of games can fit into that. It seems a little bit like the wrong way round, but unfortunately these days that's really what you have to do. So you look at the whole spectrum. Start thinking about how long things take, right? So again, you go to your super snackable, hyper-casual. You could be breaking even after a few days of just like shoveling ads at folks, and then maybe after 30 days you've made you break even after 5 days, maybe it's 10 now, and then you're basically done after day 30. But you've made quite a reasonable return, but then no one's interested in the game. And then you go right through, mid-core. Again, this is very, very loosely defined. You might have something like a 3-month break even, and then you measure your LTV after a year. Merge and puzzle, to be honest, 270 days, probably a little bit generous. They're at least 360, most of the stuff we've seen recently. But then people may go on for a couple of years, and you've got social casino as the other bookend, which people play forever, but they take a long time to monetize. So what we're trying to do is to come up with this idea of the sweet spot. Short-ish break-even doesn't require crazy amounts of capital, particularly equity capital, to scale, because that world is very, very different now. And then if you get the sweet spot right, then you can use some debt financing to scale, so your external requirement becomes less. Right, this is another story. I'm in a storytelling mood this morning. So this one was actually at Google Game Camp last September in Warsaw. And I'm sitting there with standing around a tall table with 2 different UA managers. And one of them saying, my game is achieving 130% ROAS. The other guy's like, I'm getting 140, right? So it's like, how big is your ROAS, right? The problem is that statement on its own is utterly meaningless unless you give it the context of time, right? So the guy with 130% ROAS is actually making it after about 30 days. He's got some kind of hybrid-y, casually type thing. He's returning he's getting cash flow positive, or on his ad spend, his ROAS positive after about a month. The other guy making 140% is measuring it out over 2 years. So one guy's making a 30% monthly return, and the other guy's making a 40% return over 2 years. That's 20% a year. That's like 1.6% per month, as opposed to 30. So go back to it. Like the ROAS on its own, without context of time, you might as well not even say it. So everyone knows this. You start, you spend money, gradually it comes up for air, gradually you break even, hopefully you break even, and then if all's well, then you'll go on to make profit. I have this huge thing, everyone's so focused on ROAS. It's like, oh yeah, I'm ROAS positive. All that means is your game has earned enough money to pay for the ad to buy the user. You haven't yet eaten. Facebook has just taken, or Google or whoever has just taken all the cash off the table, and you should always keep that in mind. It's what happens after you get ROAS positive that is going to make you rich. So having had this conversation time and time again, we come up with this idea of monthly return on investment, right? So give me a common denominator metric that I can compare lots of different game genres and lots of different UA opportunities across the board to figure out where I might want to actually invest my time and my money. So again, hyper casual, super quick, 20 cents in, 24 cents out after 30 days, 4 cents a profit. That's a lifetime ROI, because a lifetime in this case is 30 days, a monthly ROI of 20%, let's say. Mid-core, $3 in, takes 3 months to break even, and then you get to $4.20, so you're making $1.20, you're making a 40% over a year, which sounds pretty good, but then you take it down to a monthly return, 3.3%. And then in the previously deemed extremely sexy categories of merge and puzzle games, even longer, much higher acquisition costs, because amazingly, the ad platforms seem to be really good at predicting what the LTV of your users is going to be and then raising the price in the auction to just below what that's going to be. So the same ad slot that they'd sell for 20 cents for a hyper-casual game will sell for $5 because they know your propensity to spend, but, auctions, right? $5 in, $8 out, but it takes 2 years. So you're making $3 over 2 years. 2.5% monthly return. Now, so the general rule of thumb is, and obviously this is wildly generalistic, but very often the monthly returns come down sort of fairly dramatically according to where you're going to get to. So again, 23, 2. I wouldn't even care to estimate. I think social casino is a genre all on its own. So another thing not to forget about is basically convexity of your LTV curve. Sounds a fancy schmancy way. All it basically means is like think about the profile of how quickly your users are actually earning you cash or not. So it's not a linear thing from 0 to 360. Typically people will pay up more and then gradually it'll flatten off. So convexity actually works in your favor because the more money you're earning quickly, the more you can take out and then you can recycle back in. So don't assume this is a linear thing. You've got to try and factor in the shape of the curve. Fortunately for you guys, we have spent loads of time and effort over years building a whole suite of financial modeling tools. So totally free. There is maybe an email gate, but spoiler, you don't even have to put in your right email. We just want people using the tools to figure out, are their ad metrics any good? So are you likely, can we help you model an LTV curve, see if you're likely to break even on the ad spend based on retention, based on ARPDAU, based on acquisition costs, and if so, then what we can do is we can help you build a financial model to show the potential scaling potential of the game, and then obviously we can help you finance it if it ticks the boxes of being able to scale up. Like anything, it's actually a super simple formula. Don't focus on ROAS, focus on profit. So your profit will come, divide your profit by your acquisition cost to get your ROI. So it might be a 30% ROI, 130% ROAS. You can use them interchangeably, but we're interested in the profit component. And then figure out how long it takes you to earn that profit in number of days, and just divide it by the number of days and multiply it by 30. So theoretically, of course, you should include the sort of the shape of the curve and stuff, but for ease, then we're just doing a linear interpolation to say how much, what is my monthly ROI, what's my MRI, and then I can start to compare different opportunities and different genres across the board. So when you step back and you look at the sort of the conundrum of how everything kind of fits together. So you've got your hyper casual genre. So great, phenomenal. You can make a 20-30% monthly return on the investment, but you can't create enough games to just do that repeatedly. And that's why there's a very good reason why no hyper casual studio that I've ever heard of has ever been sold. Hyper casual publishers have, because all the publishers are doing is basically talking to hundreds of different studios looking for cannon fodder to pump through their machine. So the poor studios are left begging here for an occasional prototype and the few scraps and so on here. And the publishers will just sort of pick off the ones. The publisher is not going to publish a game unless they know it's a dead cert. And then all the publisher is doing for their 50 to 70% revenue share is programming ads and renting you the balance sheet to do so. So we're not huge fans of hyper-casual as a genre. We'd always encourage people to go further out. The other thing is like you've got puzzle games, your long LTV games again, and it's just there've been so many of them launched, it's just super hard to make money because they're so capital intensive. And VCs are much less interested, even though they've still got a lot of cash to deploy. My point here is basically if you look at the ROAS profile of a game in whatever genre, and then you want to spend a certain amount every day, let's say, how much capital are you going to need to fund that? And in this case, how cash negative do you go before you actually start to make some money? So here's an idea, and this is, I changed the numbers a little bit, but it was actually a company I spoke to in Turkey last year who had some sort of fairly ambitious plans, should we say. So they thought they had a great game, great metrics. They wanted to spend 100,000 a day, and they actually wanted to debt finance the whole lot. The problem is their break-even, by their own probably massively optimistic estimates, was until day 270. So what they were basically trying to say is that they wanted to spend $27 million. The game, by the way, had about 5,000 of revenue per month. They wanted to spend $27 million of someone else's money before their first cohorts were even predicted to break even. not going to happen. Some people, by the way, did do this, and they raised equity to do it. So a massive transfer payment from, VC into Facebook ads or Google ads. But in the real world, these days are very much over. So how can you look at financing? I mean, venture capital to fund user acquisition in the last 18 months is basically dead. No one's interested, which is the right thing to do. Factoring revenue-based loans. This is more about revenue-based loans. This is the idea of people saying, we'll give you a bunch of money, you put it into user acquisition, we'll take a skim of your revenues until we've been paid back. We've been doing this for almost 10 years. I think that is like a crazy business. But sometimes, because there occasionally are people that will do that, if someone's prepared to do that, we saw someone with $30,000 of revenue per month, that someone offered them $1 million revenue-based loan. I'm like, take it. It's like a free trip to the casino. They didn't want personal security, all the rest of it. Unfortunately, these guys are figuring out it's a really bad business model, so I don't really think there's a lot of it going on. Bank, AR facility, accounts receivable, or venture debt. Venture debt is typically like a term loan over several years. So you basically take $1 million, whatever, and you pay it back with interest over a 3, 4, 5 year period. It doesn't work for user acquisition. For user acquisition, you want to be able to scale up and down if the opportunity's there. So it's like a square peg in a round hole. The AR facility from a bank can be cheap, although it's a lot harder to get post SVB and so on now. It can be fairly cheap, but they're very, very paper-based and manual. So you typically have to wait till the end of the month before you can show them a self-billing invoice that you can then discount. So there's no technology behind it, and very often that is that's an impediment. Publishers, some people will still go and try and get their games published. It's just down to ambition. I mean, come and talk to me if you want to see the data, whatever. But effectively, we ran some data on publicly available M&A data over the last couple of years, and 2 years ago, only 2% of studios that got acquired used a publisher to get their games to market. Last year, it was 0%. So if you actually ever want to build something you can sell, you need to learn to self-publish. And then lastly, kind of stuff, we do non-bank revolving credit. So this is like a financial product specifically designed for scaling apps and games that's using digitally verified data both on receivables, but also residual value left in existing cohorts. And we provide these very flexible facilities to help scale. Come back to the little farming analogy that I was thinking about. Hyper-casual, or let's say you're getting your games to market in terms of development cycle as well as LTV cycles. You're super short. You're getting your product to market. You're a farmer. You're getting your product to market in 7 days. What could go wrong? The hydroponics could fail, something like that. But really, there's very little that can go wrong. So it's very certain, and it's quick. It's quick to fail, etc. Whereas if you're farming sugarcane, you might not see your harvest until the seeds won't come up ROAS positive until like maybe a year, in which case there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. You could have drought, you could have disease, you could have war, you could have anything. It's very, very hard to predict what's going to happen 1 year out or 2 years out. So I thought that was quite an interesting analogy here. So key takeaway, what kind of crop, what kind of farmer are you? What kind of farmer do you want to be? Be realistic in terms of benchmarks, and then use MROI as a sounding board, basically sanity check to say, like, can I make a decent return within a reasonable time frame for comparing the opportunities around there. So quite a lot of ground covered there. I think we've got a few minutes left for any quick Q&A if anyone's got anything they want to ask or comment on that. There's got to be one.
If you have any questions.
If not, I'm going to be around all of today and most of tomorrow. Please feel free and come and call on me if you've got any other questions on that.
I have a question.
Shoot.
So having all this experience in investment and technology businesses, why exactly did you decide to dive into mobile gaming business?
Very, very simple. I had the problem myself. So I did an enterprise software company for 9 years, and I figured that the sales cycle for enterprise software in banking, what we were doing, was 2 years, and it was killing me. So I resolved to get out of that and to go and do something that had short outcomes. So I marched into record labels without any music background and persuaded them to license me the multi-track recordings for currently charting music before they were mixed down. We built a remix app. So we built a remix app. We were using radio as an acquisition channel. We did a contra deal with a radio station in London. We had 46 ad slots a week in return for half of the IAP revenue that we were making after we'd paid the record labels. And we got 30 days into that. Everything was going pretty well, and they had some major reorg, and it wasn't just us. All of their digital projects were put on hold. So at that time, we'd done 30,000 downloads in 30 days. We had $20,000 sitting in the bank of Apple that was going to be paid out in another 30-something days after that. So I went to every single invoice finance company in London and said, Apple's going to pay this money on this date, and I need to access it now because I've got mouths to feed. And they all said, no, unless there's an invoice which you can send me that Apple can rubber stamp and say they're going to pay, then we can't help you. So after 7 no's, I decided I was going to put down the music business, which, by the way, was extremely hard. I would never advise anyone to get into that, and set up a digital receivables financing business instead. Because my early career, I did 7 years working for UBS, the Swiss investment bank, running short-term credit risk. So as far as I was concerned, this is like taking a feed directly from Apple, getting paid directly from Apple. So you were effectively taking credit risk on Apple. So it was just one of these, I was the guy with the problem, and I needed to find a solution for it stories.
Wow, thank you. Maybe someone came up with a question in this time?
Yeah, first thanks for the keynote, that was extremely helpful. Do you have any ideas how the MRI changes over time with the life stage of the product? Because you can make a very smart choice about the genre you're building in. And as you start fresh, the MRI is like 1. But then as you progress and you buy out a lot of the traffic in the market and you build a huge audience, the MRI goes down and you find yourself with a product in this genre, but with totally different metrics, like 5 years after you started.
That's a very, very good question, right? And I actually half wrote on the plane out yesterday, something which will be baked within the next week or so, which I'm going to publish, and it's basically a concept of running yield. Now, you're right, it will change over time, so you can't just say, it's not just one metric that just stays static, right? It's going to change. So basically, the concept, actually, it was literally just, I ideating on the plane yesterday, is like, I could look at running yield in 2 different ways. I could look at the total amount I'd ever spent on user acquisition, and then the total amount of revenues. Look at it on a, yeah. So literally running, rolling, whatever, on everything, on my total investment ever, my lifetime on cumulative revenue versus cumulative whatever, and I can see that yield go negative, go positive, whatever. Because the way I'm thinking about it is just like, how would I finance it? If I had to borrow the money, can I finance that and make a profit? I have to finance it somehow. Or the other thing you can do is like a cohort running yield. So I can look and say, I can look at the cohort every day, and I can just track what my running yields look like over all of the cohorts. So I literally, it was freshly baked, right? I haven't even written it all up yet. I just wrote the notes for it. But I thought that was quite an interesting concept. So I had the same idea. It's like, this isn't like set and forget. This is going to change over time with maturity of product and UA dynamics as well. But I thought that was quite an interesting way to look at it.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's say thank you to Martin by giving him a round of applause.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.